Now I want to make a bit of a confession, and I've never made this confession before, and I'm glad to make it. I was, in many respects, part of the problem. We all were, by the way. But part of the problem, and this is not to brag at all on my part, but to say how deeply involved and committed I was to economic development of countries around the world, to helping corporations expand their businesses around the world, and feeling that all of this time during those years, particularly after I left the diplomatic service and where I was involved deeply in Asia during the Johnson and Nixon administrations, and went to a firm called Arthur D. Little, which is a well-known consulting firm, where I was the head of Asia for 10 years. And during those years, and then subsequent years with some other consulting work, examples is I was working for Aramco, which is the Saudi oil company, before it was nationalized and owned by Mobil Oil. I worked for Citibank. Citibank hired Arthur D. Little, and I ended up being the head of the case. And they said, Citibank came to us and said, "Okay, we're going to have a 10-year plan that we're working on for our entire businesses of Citibank, all around the world, and we want you to predict what the world's going to look like over these 10 years." And we said, well, no one can predict the future, and we can't either, and neither can you. But what we can do is we can tell you what the driving forces are that are likely to push the world in one direction or another. Nationalism, economic issues, social issues, the rise of China, whatever it may be, okay? And so I had about 50 or 60 people working. Some were working on various regions and countries in the world. Others were working on various industries, software, hardware, all this kind of stuff. And we pulled it together, and we then said, this is the likely future, and that's about a 70% chance, and this way and that. And therefore, if we can't predict that, but we can tell you if the world is moving in that direction, these are some of the implications for your business. I was the head of a study both in Taiwan and then in Korea to help them think through what their next, in one case, 5-year plan and the other 10-year plan for their electronics industry. And I wrote a Harvard Business Review article called "The Business Potential of Southeast Asia." My point in mentioning all of that is that was the story that I told myself, that economic development driven by fossil fuels would help build populations, build prosperity, and help corporations be profitable and help everybody, da-da-da-da-da. I confess that there were two things that I didn't take into account in my headlong rush into all of these things over those years. One was I didn't distinguish between bad economic activity and good economic activity. And what I mean by we have had a notion of economic growth at all costs to planet and often people. Our good friends, Pachamama Alliance, some of you know Pachamama Alliance, they're down focused. They started, the twists started in Ashwar territory in the Amazon, where Texaco went down there and was pumping oil out and wrecking their habitat, wrecking the land and damaging the livelihood of the people. And that was all counted as economic growth. BP spills billions of tons of oil into the Gulf, and the destruction of the natural world is not counted as lowering our GNP, i.e. our measure of economic success. But when BP pays workers to clean it up, that is counted. And the second thing I didn't focus on is the subject of this evening, which is the unintended consequences of fossil fuels into the atmosphere. In terms of corporations, it's very interesting to see the corporations, they must take a leading role, and that's moving actually fairly quickly. In this book that I wrote, I said this, which now seems to be becoming, I won't read it from here, I'll just read here. To many, the response from the business world to the challenge of climate change was surprising. Many businesses realized that it was in their self-interest to act, and they proved more agile than imagined. They could see the spiraling costs of operating in climate chaos. They knew that they would not only lose money, but also customers, talented employees, and investors if they did not authentically address the issues of reducing carbon emissions and the efficient use of resources. Millennials in particular were quick to call out corporations that sought to continue business as usual. Now, since that time, BlackRock, which is the world's largest financial advising firm, which has $7 trillion under investment, has come out, Lawrence Fink, the CEO, and basically say, not because we're do-gooders, he didn't use that terminology, of course. He said, because the world is moving off of fossil fuels, we are shifting our portfolios off of fossil fuels. That's $7 trillion. That's sort of big money. Okay, now that's not all going to happen one day and all the rest. You see endowments of universities that because of pressure from the students, the trustees are saying, okay, you're right. Okay? You're seeing JetBlue that came out to become say they could become carbon neutral in all their flights in the United States by July of 2020, partly using biofuels. You see Microsoft that came out a month ago and said that they will be carbon negative by 2030. You saw Davos's Klaus Schwab, who was the fellow about my age that's been running it all these years, that came out strongly in support of youth and the need for business to shift. You see this from the former chairman of Unilever. He started an organization which is called Imagine One, in which their opening lines are, "We are business leaders who believe. Humanity and our planet are facing historic challenges, and CEOs around the world recognize it. From the climate crisis to widening inequality, we read the news and in between the lines. Governments cannot reverse the trajectory in time. Youth movements and civil societies are mobilizing but cannot change the system. Business is either part of the solution or part of the problem." So I wanted to be ending up here on a very positive note. The shift is taking place, and you all, and myself, and he, and everybody else, has to be really focused like a laser on doing what we can do. Okay, some people can dry the laundry on the line, and other people can change the trajectory of $7 trillion in financial assets.